Hello and welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be giving an exciting program update. My name is Leah McGrath and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director for StateRAMP. And I'm joined today by a couple of our phenomenal leaders and just really appreciate their time and all that they've given to StateRAMP. We're joined by Sean Hughes, who is the Assistant Secretary for Technology, Security, and Operations, as well as the Chief Operating Officer for the Massachusetts Executive Office of Technology, Services, and Security. And Sean also serves as the chairman of our Standards and Technical Committee. We also have Dan Lorman, founding steering committee member for StateRAMP and also our vice chair of our Standards and Technical Committee. He serves as the Field Chief Information Security Officer for Presidio and is a former state Chief Information Security Officer from the state of Michigan. So thank you for being with us today. As well as Noah Brown, our StateRAMP PMO Director. And these three individuals were just integral in leading the effort of updating our security baselines from NIST 853 Rev 4 to NIST 853 Rev 5. If those are new terms to you, let me tell you. NIST stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technology. 853 refers to the special publication that's named 800-53. And this is the fifth version that has been published by NIST of really the best practices of cloud security controls. And so, Dan, I don't know if you remember, I know Noah will, but in 2020, when StateRAMP was being founded, we had several meetings on what should the security framework look like, what should those baseline controls look like. And it was quite literally the week after our committee had met that NIST rolled out Rev 5. So that was sort of ironic and a little bit humorous at the time after all that work. But it's such a cool thing to be here today talking about actually moving to Rev 4 and the update. Maybe before we head into, I know we're going to talk a little bit about the process and what these baseline controls are and the differences and how we're going to transition. But before we get into that, I want to invite Secretary Hughes and Dan Lorman to maybe give some insights on the process. But it really began, this year was really fun. In our very first work session, we had some kind of new committee members who really brought us back home to say, hey, before we go forward, gut check, right? Why are we basing our security requirements on NIST 853? And that was a great discussion. So I want to toss it out to you two to help us level set, start with the same baseline, right? Of why NIST 853 for StateRAMP as our foundation.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. NIST is widely accepted as the gold standard in today's environment, and these standards and frameworks are important, to securing our environments, and especially for our state and local governments that participate in StateRAMP, as well as those service providers. So the concept of complete once, use many truly does reduce time and costs for all those involved. And the NIST Rev 5 model allows us to accomplish that.
Absolutely. Dan.
Yeah, I just would add to that as well. I mean, I think, I totally agree with Sean that NIST is the gold standard. And, we think about cybersecurity framework. Almost every state, local government I talk to has adopted the cybersecurity framework, and NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, has been the organization that's been looked to really for everything that's not like classified, top secret, and there's other controls people talk about for those kind of environments. But when you start talking about a unified approach across federal and state governments, local governments, states and local governments are the custodians of federal data. And there really is a lot of linkage, not just with, how they're financed, the budgets, how the partnership works between the federal and state and local governments, but just overall, NIST is really viewed as the gold standard. It's viewed as the go-to organization that people have been following literally for decades, going back at the beginning of my career for sure. And so I think it totally makes sense. It's what the federal government uses. It's what FedRAMP uses. and really following in with that, and really also thinking about, we're going to talk about this a little bit, but if you're in the private sector and companies are creating products, and being able to provide security solutions that can cut across the federal and state space, and having that baseline framework, having that baseline standard as 800-53 just really is an obvious choice and the right choice.
Yeah, it's that common language, as you said, kind of across the different sectors and certainly from federal to state. Sean, walk us through a little bit, and Vice Chairman Lorman as well, the process that we went through as we were kind of transitioning from Rev 4 to Rev 5.
Well, I guess I'll begin, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the StateRAMP Board of Directors, the Steering Committee, Appeals Committee, the Standards and Technical Committee, and probably most important as part of this process, the staff at StateRAMP for all their hard work getting us to where we are with this framework. The Standards and Technical Committee held 3 working sessions with the Appeals Committee members, and various subgroup sessions throughout. Led to a lot of great discussions at the meetings. A lot of questions got answered. A lot of preparation was conducted in advance of these sessions. Again, thanks to not only the committee members, but the StateRAMP staff. And all that preparation afforded the teams to have more detailed discussions, difference of opinions, which is beneficial to getting the best outcome for state and local governments here. So, considering the various views that were represented of both public and private sectors was critical to get us to the point where we are.
Dan, anything else?
Yeah, I just want to add, just to make sure everyone is aware of who's on these committees, and we have a mixture, I think, an excellent mixture of government professional leaders like Sean, CISOs from around the country that participate. In previous year, as we started looking at all this, Nancy Rainasek from Texas, other people, I'll start calling out names, I'm going to leave people off, but, other CISOs around the country that have been involved. And then a lot of other former CISOs, people like Maria Thompson, who came from North Carolina and now at AWS, but there's a lot of others from, I'm with Presidio, but we have people from different states with the backgrounds, but also bringing in the vendor community, 3 PAOs, that were involved in discussion, people who do this day in and day out, and actually are the experts in each individual area. I put Noah certainly in that category as an expert. He's going to talk in a few moments here. They really know this, really kind of chapter and verse. I don't say the good, bad, and ugly, but they really know all the different aspects of it, and they've lived through the processes. And all those, having that mix, and then going through several rounds, allowing people, giving people time to really think through it, send out the recommendations, giving people time, saying, okay, in some cases we didn't, we do an hour and a half meeting, and they'll come back and relook at it again. And then most recently opening this up to the wider community. We felt like it was very important that all the different committees, because this is such an important revision, it really is key for StateRAMP to get this right. And so, allowing really anyone who's involved in the wider community with StateRAMP, really kind of in any role, and across, state and local governments, across the private sector, giving them a chance to have input into this. And I think we've done that really well. So really, it's been a very transparent process, very open process, and a very consistent process that has continued through over the last, really more than 6 months.
Definitely. And so the Standards and Technical Committee in May, I think, finally got to that point where they were able to, after all the work sessions and subgroup meetings, make that recommendation on baseline standards that was adopted. And so now we've got our Rev 5 baseline standards, and I'm going to pull up slides to talk a little bit about Rev 5 and invite Noah as well to join the discussion. So here we go. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Perfect. Thanks, Leah.
Absolutely.
So big changes to Rev 5. The main piece is the addition of privacy and supply chain risk management families. So from the privacy side, privacy was kind of dealt usually as an afterthought throughout NIST and the requirements for those controls. They've actually created it as its own family as part of the control catalog, which is privacy is becoming more and more prevalent as an issue, not just in the United States, but globally. So including that as an actual cataloged control family was a big step. The supply chain risk management family, there's been a lot of information out in the news related to breaches or third-party security solutions being hacked, leading to a larger person leveraging those solutions being hacked. So the executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity, so that was released back in May of 2021. It really acknowledges the number of security risks that are out there throughout the supply chain. So this new family does a really good job of helping to mitigate those risks and gives providers food for thought on requirements they should put in place for an area that's been a large cause of breaches lately. So it's the addition of those two families. There's a little over 60 new base controls, and depending on which framework you're looking at, anywhere between 150 to 200 new control enhancements. The big changes, we've had a lot of controls that were removed, some that were merged. There's a long list and information out there on all the different changes between those controls. But there's a lot of new functionality and new requirements that are in place that are really helping to drive security forward, especially in the cloud space as things change so rapidly.
Well, maybe walk us through, thank you so much for that, some of the differences between StateRAMP's Rev 4 baseline and what we're transitioning to with Rev 5.
Sure. So Rev 4 and Rev 5. So for the Rev 4 side, for our low and moderate solutions, those were 117 and 325 controls. And for the new Rev 5 baselines, 156 controls and then 323 for moderate. So it actually incorporates some of those additional third-party security controls or third-party risk management. Part of that, there's a lot of changes in low and addition of controls that needed to be added in order to bring up the low baseline, because a lot of those low baseline systems plug into or have an integration with other higher impact level systems. So trying to raise that watermark for the low systems to make sure that they're still protected. And then on the moderate side, while there is a decrease in 2 controls, it does include additional controls for that supply chain risk management family. The reason for the decrease in the controls is that there's a lot of controls in moderate that were merged, some that were removed and new ones created to cover some of those earlier requirements from Rev 4. If you look through the controls, you'll see some controls that originally referenced only one requirement that are now referencing a couple. So when we went through our analysis, we had a little over 30 new controls. We had 9 that were merged requirements, and then a bunch of controls that were required in StateRAMP that were removed from Rev 5 that we carried over from Rev 4 to Rev 5 to maintain security and some of the requirements we have for third-party testing as part of our program.
One of the questions that we always hear is, what is the difference between StateRAMP's baseline and that of FedRAMP's? And so we did have the opportunity to really take a look at what FedRAMP was proposing for their Rev 5 baseline while this was being put together. So maybe kind of explain, give a little context for the differences.
Sure. So we actually had a really fantastic discussion with some really technical experts on our side, as well as some of the people from the FedRAMP PMO to talk about the controls, what their requirements were, and really get kind of an inside look on what they were looking at implementing for a baseline. So for the StateRAMP program, for low, we removed 3 controls required by FedRAMP, and we modified parameters for 2 controls. We also removed 4 controls on the moderate impact baseline, and then modified parameters for 5 controls. So for those, they really the focus for those controls is PIV interoperability and encryption. So one of the key requirements for FedRAMP that we do not require for StateRAMP is FIPS 140-2 validated encryption. Usually through the CVMP program. In our case, we've modified those controls to allow providers who are using modern encryption types to allow more flexibility in the market, especially for state and local government.
I think that's an important point. I'm just going to underscore and maybe invite others to the conversation, because we've had this question before when providers or some of the participating governments say, well, wait, what do you mean there's no FIPS required? there's still, it's really around that implementation guidance, so that, as you said, Noah, maybe go into a little bit more detail around, there's still a look, right, at the modern use of, or use of modern encryption tools. But what's that difference? Can you go into that specifically?
Sure. So on the FIPS 140-2 CVMP side of things, there's a website for providers who can go out and find the encryption types that they are leveraging and whether they have a current certificate for that encryption type. Now, and most providers who take those things through the laboratory testing and everything required for them will tell you it can take years to get those things approved. So in our case, we've decided to remove the requirement. You also have certificates that can go to historical status. They haven't been renewed yet, and that can cause holdups in the market too. And FedRAMP as a mandate is required to check those things. So on the StateRAMP side, from the private sector, the 3 PAOs, as well as the state and local government officials we work with that not being a mandate requirement for us, we're able to still leverage technology and encryption that has the same level of strength and cipher requirements, but it's not to the same requirement on the testing certificate CVMP catalog side. So it takes a little bit of a burden off the service provider community, and throughout the testing that the 3 PAOs do, we can ensure that they're still getting the same level of protection that would be expected from a similar encryption type.
Very helpful. Anything else to add on those points, Chairman Hughes or Vice Chairman Lorman? Okay. Kind of talking then about what's next. So we have the baseline adopted, and now kind of working through the timing of templates and process and implementation. So maybe Noah walk through what to expect from what's next, and then Dan and Sean, we can talk a little bit about how we got there.
Sure. So the StateRAMP PMO team is working through the Rev 5 documentation update. So that's building out all of the templates. We're also looking to, not just take our Rev 4 templates and convert them over to Rev 5, but we're also looking at ways that we can streamline some of this process and reduce paperwork. So we will have new StateRAMP Rev 5 templates coming out. We'll be pushing those to the Standards and Technical Committee meeting over the coming months. And the commitment is that we will have all of those templates available and ready by January of 2024, but you will likely start seeing those things come into the website as they get created, reviewed, and approved. And then for service providers who are coming through our program, the requirement to comply with the Rev 5 requirements is October of 2024. So that way we give providers in the 3 PAO community enough time to fully get to that new baseline requirement and that new documentation.
That's right. And this transition and the timeline, maybe Sean and Dan kind of speak to how we arrived at that time frame.
Yeah, and Dan mentioned earlier, we felt it was crucial to seek input from our members. So a lot of time and effort went into that. We sent the baseline to members prior to adopting. But more importantly, with this transition plan, we asked members for their input. We received some fantastic feedback, and that puts us in a position where I believe we have realistic goals here of implementation for Rev 5.
Yeah, I just want to add that I think when you think about what the federal government is doing with FedRAMP and their timeline, we did look at that as well. We didn't want to get ahead of them. They're a little bit ahead of us, a little bit more aggressive. So we're a little bit, I don't want to use the word behind, but we are learning from their experiences as well. So we feel like this schedule is very achievable, but it also is in following what kind of what I believe is the best practice, and really not getting in front of. Obviously, we're different from FedRAMP. It's unique and different, but at the same time, they are partners of ours, and so we really want to make sure that we learn those lessons that maybe the federal government will be learning. So I don't have. Maybe you can mention, Noah, what the federal deadline is. They're a little bit ahead of us, but I feel really good about these dates. No, do you want to comment on what is it? What the federal dates a little bit ahead of this, right?
So FedRAMP, yeah, they're a little bit ahead. They also have they actually have out on their website. It's a very large document that goes over. It's tiered as
Yeah.
far as when your assessment is due and when you're required to be compliant with Rev 5. I don't want to misspeak, so I'd recommend anybody that
we're
have
not. That's
questions
for
on
them.
it
Go out and look
to
at
go
theirs.
up to that website.
Just wanted to throw that out there that we're not getting ahead of. I just wanted to mention we're not getting ahead of FedRAMP on this.
Yep.
I'm going to stop sharing a couple of things. Thank you so much for walking through that. A couple of things, if you are looking at the website, if you go to www.stateramp.org/templates-resources, that's where you can see the updated Rev 5 baseline. You can also see all of the current documents and templates that are based on Rev 4. As Noah mentioned, what you're going to start seeing, and so if you're not receiving our emails, make sure you are. But every month we send a monthly e-news, and then we certainly will send updates. But what you'll start seeing is really a duplicate page. So we will maintain our templates and resources for Rev 4, as well as create a new templates and resources page for Rev 5. So as those templates and resources become available, we're going to be pointing you straight there. Because what our security team, thank you, Noah and team, will be doing is accepting all of those Rev 4 throughout, up to October of 2024. So you can still, if you're working toward that, maybe you have your progressing snapshot program and you're working toward your first audit, know that that is there and you can depend on the Rev 4 baselines being available to you come October. That's where we wanted to just simplify. I think that was the feedback we really had, was simplify it, say, okay, October 1, that's the date, that's the line in the sand that we would move to Rev 5. So if you do have questions, we're going to invite you and encourage you to reach out to us at info@stateramp.org. You can also attend. We have weekly PMO office hours. Those are fantastic. If you have technical questions or you want to dig into this, please do that and let us know. But that's where you can find the Rev 5 baselines. Before I let this fabulous team go, though, Sean and Dan, maybe, what's ahead, what's coming next? While Noah and team are working on all those exciting templates and documents, what else is coming next?
I think we have some exciting things potentially on the horizon, looking early fall, potentially to make it a announcement on a collaboration for a CJIS task force, which will not be a certification process, but an overlay to provide guidance to state and local governments with the recent published FBI CJIS security policy. So that's very exciting, I think, for an opportunity of collaboration.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we also have a joint task force with NASPO, which, National Association of Purchasing Officers. It's a mouthful.
I know we're throwing out all the acronyms today.
NASPO, National Association of Purchasing. The purchasing people, the ones with the credit cards, which you really, or the checkbooks, maybe is a better way to say it, not credit card. But yeah, that's going to be excellent. Always have a good relationship with them, and that's going to be helpful. And I just also want to just say thank you to everybody that's been involved in this process, to the StateRAMP team, to Noah, his team, but to Leah, you, and everyone. I mean, this has been a lot of work. A lot has happened in the last couple of years, and this is also a big, I don't say a big change, but it is a big change. And so it's moving forward in a positive way. So thank you to everybody that's been involved in the process.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being with us today. We will follow up with an email with some links to all the things that we mentioned. If you have questions, reach out. And to Noah, Sean, and Dan, anything else for the good of the cause? All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.